Gamers are obsessed with games, right? I mean, there's a reason we play them. But what about stuff inside games we get fixated on? Hi folks, it's Falcon, and today on gameranx, 10 secret obsessions of gamers. Starting off with number 10, it's kill-death ratio. This might sound like a no-brainer, but believe it or not, it's kind of different than you might think. Like, there's a good reason a lot of multiplayer games are moving away from constantly displaying your kills and deaths on the screen, because it's really easy to get obsessed with. Obviously, yes, it's something you should care about. Like, we all want to get better at that ratio, and it's the easiest way to gauge how well you're doing in a game. But for a lot of people, it's easy to go too far with the KD. Like, there's a lot of gamers who exclusively focus on their own personal ratio above all else to the detriment of their team, like playing cautiously, just sticking to sniping, not pushing objectives, or really making a major dent in the round. They just hide in a corner and camp the entire time, picking off somebody when they can and avoiding any real danger. Not a huge deal when one or two people are doing it, but when everyone's obsessing over KDs, then multiplayer games just get really tedious. And yeah, everybody pretends they don't care about the ratio, like they're above it, and they're more about having fun or being a team player. But when push comes to shove, a lot of people start getting scared that deaths are gonna overcome the ratio, and the turtling begins. And I don't mean the bathroom-related one. There's a ton of people out there who will happily admit all they do is obsess over the kills and deaths. It's kind of hardly the most secret gaming obsession out there, but there's a lot of people out there who say they don't care, and secretly they do. In fact, they care more than anyone. And number 9 is game performance, especially from people who say they don't care about graphics. If you're a PC gamer, doesn't matter how much you claim otherwise, in the back of your mind you care about performance. We all do, that's just the way it is. Let's say you play games on both console and on PC. When you're on PC, you're trying to make it work better. When you're on console, you're not. Period. When you're on PC, you can tinker, and eventually you get sucked in the rabbit hole and you start watching benchmark videos and clicking through the PC gaming wiki for little tips and settings you can integrate into your little setup. And at some point, the obsession over performance takes precedence over actually playing the game, and that's when you know you've gone too far. Now, I'm as guilty of this as anyone else. When you get a new graphics card or PC, you really want to test everything out. Even if all you're eventually going to do is play Stardew Valley, it doesn't matter. This is another one of those things where, yeah, obviously there's nothing wrong with caring about performance. You want the best experience possible when you're playing a game, right? But it's not great when it starts getting in the way of actually enjoying what you have. That's when it's gone too far, you know? And number 8 is multitasking, also known as alt-tab mania. So, distractions are a big thing in our modern digital age. There's so much crap out there to take in that it's kind of difficult to focus on a single task at any given time. Like, it's, yeah, fine, normal to watch some trash TV or something on a second screen, or listen to a podcast where you're grinding an RPG or something, just mindlessly playing something story-free. But some gamers really take things a lot further than that. I'm talking about all the alt-tabbers who are obsessed with doing something else while gaming. You know the type. You might be the type even. You start a game up, play it for 5 minutes, then you all tab out to check Twitter, TikTok, or whatever. Then you come back to the game for a few minutes, then it's back to surfing the web. Like, it's impossible to get immersed in a game if you're experiencing it in 5-minute bursts. But it's an obsession, and some people just can't help themselves. For this type of gamer, it's difficult to finish a game because of how easily distracted they are. But hey, if they're satisfied with what they played, I don't know if it's right to complain. Like, unless it's multiplayer and like they get distracted in the middle of the match, that's a problem. But it seems like this happens more single player games anyway, so I don't know. Probably most of us do this occasionally anyway, and maybe we're all a little afraid to admit it. And number 7, playing a game series in chronological order. It's another one of those weird obsessions that doesn't really make rational sense at times, but for some reason, a lot of people like getting into a game series and want to play them in chronological order. The game series may not be chronologically in order when it's in chronological order, too. Let's just keep that in mind. Like, there are games that are like Gears of War, where numerically the story progresses. Somebody starts at 1 and gets to 5, but then there's series like Final Fantasy, where there's no continuity between the numbered games at all. And then there's Metal Gear Solid, which, yeah, you get the point there. The obsession, though, I mean, it's kind of commendable. You got to respect somebody who really wants to appreciate the classics, but it can also also inevitably lead to a burnout. See Final Fantasy. Trying to play that many games in short order, especially when they're all pretty similar, like let's say Ratchet and Clank, things start to get repetitive and it can skew your perspective on the series. That's when you start to see the weird opinions from people about how they didn't like a game that most people consider to be the best in the series because they were just barreling through the entire series in a week and we're starting to get tired of the whole thing at that point. It's kind of a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation because you either rush through and get bored or you wait a year between games and it takes a decade before you finally sit down and play the game that you wanted to play in the first place. And number 6, reloading. Ooh, didn't even have to go anywhere with that. You know what I mean. Everyone knows what I mean. This is an obsession that we all have, and it can only be broken out of through intense practice. Play any FPS game that has reloading, and you know I'm going to reload whenever I don't need to shoot. Bam! All right, defeated that guy, reload. Bam, bam! Okay, he's gone. Okay, reload. Doesn't matter that there's an enemy right around the corner. Doesn't matter that the KD ratio is going to plummet. That guy's dead, and I need to reload now. It's much worse in games with realistic reload mechanics, too. Like in games where if you reload, you lose the entire magazine. Then you're just actively hurting yourself every single time you reload. It doesn't matter, though. I have to reload. It's one of the dumbest obsessions, but we all have it. The only people who don't have it are those who have trained their brains with intense discipline. That's the only way they're not doing it. Yeah, sure, there's probably a few people out there who just never cared about ammo, but those people probably suck at the game. They're not thinking about ammo management at all, so that's probably rare in terms of a long-term player of the game. And number 5, replaying a game and doing nothing differently. Like, a ton of games out there are all about player choice. You pick your class, good, evil, blah, blah. You do whatever, see how the story plays out. A big part of the appeal of these kinds of games is the replayability. You can go back and experience the story in a completely different way, or it's just a way where you diverge in some respect. That's the theory anyway. For a lot of gamers out there, even when you do manage to go back through a second time, instead of trying out something new and experiencing if, things change, people just do the same thing that they did the last time. Pick the same class, make the same choices, pretty much do it all the same. And I'm as guilty of this as anyone. There's so many games where you can pick a good and an evil ending, and I'm just not interested in the evil ending. I mean, I'm not saying I'm never interested in the evil ending. Sometimes I'm interested in the evil ending, but most of the time I'm not. It just seems like human beings are creatures of habit, so we stick to things that are familiar, even when it's something as pointless as picking your virtual girlfriend in an RPG. It's one of those little obsessions that's a secret for a reason. You're basically admitting that you like to waste your time, you know? And number 4 is item hoarding. It's one of those obsessions that's super easy to admit while you're playing a game, but when it's a harder game, it goes from being something that's kind of funny to legitimately obsessive behavior. Like, if you're saving elixirs in Final Fantasy VII, I don't think anybody's going to hold that against you. You never really need them in the game. It's a pretty easy RPG overall, so being a hoarder of that isn't really strange. But being a hoarder in a much harder game is weird. Like, imagine refusing to use Estus Flask upgrades or upgrade materials in like a Souls game. Obviously, single-use healing items never get used, but all that other stuff, it should be fair game. Everybody holds on to resources in an RPG way past when you need them. It's just so easy to say they could come in handy later. I'm planning ahead because I'm a big old smarty pants. Look at my big old brain. It's only outsized by my inventory. But when it is a little later and you actually run into a boss that gives you trouble and you die constantly and you still refuse to use those items, that's an obsession. It's like in a Resident Evil game where you refuse to use ammo during a boss fight. It's just counterintuitive at a certain point. But, also everybody's been there. I know I've gotten a little too precious about ammo in a Resident Evil game, and by the end, it just made the game way harder for myself with no real benefit. And number 3, starting the perfect game, aka restart syndrome. If you ever play an RPG, a strategy game, or a city builder, and things just don't work out perfectly at the start, so you just completely restart the game. It's normal up to a certain point, but when people do it constantly, it becomes restart syndrome. Like you're constantly restarting a game after any minor setback. These are the types who just never finish a campaign in a game like Total Warhammer 2, or finish building a city in a SimCity game, or at least when SimCity was a tolerable thing to play. Or looking at it more from the RPG side, this type of person is never quite satisfied with their build, or the character doesn't look quite right in-game, or you made some choice early that they didn't like. Instead of just rolling with it, they just start over. The character creation thing is a particular pet peeve of mine. I have friends where, I enjoy playing single-player games through with them where you just hand off the controller and sort of experience the story, but there are some of them that do that specifically. It drives me nuts. It's one of those obsessions where perfect is the enemy of good, because you have to deal with at least a few setbacks in every game, and you just kind of have to roll with it. There's certain gamers who take this even further, where they won't continue from a save file at all. They have to restart all over if they're not going to get through it in one sitting, which sounds totally, absolutely nuts to me, but there are people like that. I know whenever I start a strategy game, it's always a hurdle getting past the first major setback. It can be tempting to restart, but it's often better to just keep going. Even if you lose, you at least learn something. Well, most of the time anyways. And number 2, the fear of missing out, also known as FOMO, which no one really wants to admit is real, but it's real. The thing about FOMO is there's so many different kinds of it when it comes to gaming. You could be talking about just about anything, from new games to graphics cards to the more traditional application of the term with stuff like battle passes and limited time events. All of it leads to FOMO. Everyone says they don't fall for it, that it doesn't bother them, and that they don't care, but the secret is that pretty much everybody falls for FOMO at least once in a while. Maybe it's a game you get overly hyped about in pre-order, only to get burned by day one bugs, or a battle pass skin that actually looks cool, but it doesn't really matter what it is, I guess. But you rush to get it, even when it shouldn't matter, because you don't want to miss out. Like, yes, Sonic the Hedgehog is running around in Sonic Frontiers for me with the soap shoes, because I signed up for their newsletter, because I wanted the soap shoes. Like, you're still gonna be able to buy the game later, or that skin. Even if it's really gone forever, it's just kind of a pointless piece of digital content that'll disappear eventually anyway, so it shouldn't matter, but it does. It's natural. It's almost unavoidable. Like, we're all gonna make stupid decisions because of FOMO. No matter how frugal you are. Someday, a sale's gonna come around. It just seems like it's too good to pass up, but a better deal will come around. That's how it works. It's inevitable. And finally, at number 1, the backlog, aka buying games and then not playing them. This one, perfect follow-up to FOMO, because a lot of the time FOMO causes it. So when it comes to free games, it's easy to admit you have a load to catch up on. Oh, there's a bunch of games on Game Pass I want to play because I have the Game Pass and it throws all of these games at me. That's easy to say. In fact, that's even the point of the service, to keep you subscribed, because you got games that you haven't played yet that you can play because you don't have to pay any more to play them. But when it comes to a lot of games you buy, often at full price, there's a chance you're one of the people that never plays them, and that backlog gets embarrassing. Basically, this entire entry boils down to impulsive buying. You see something cool and you buy it, even though you're already focusing on something else and probably don't have time to play it. Sure, you tell yourself you get around to it, but by the time you finish the game you're working on, the next big thing comes around. The previous game you bought gets pushed back. You tell yourself you'll get around to it, and then something else comes around, or there's a sale, whatever, and suddenly you got this massive backlog. It's one of those secrets that is both open and very secret. Like, for more casual gamers, it's almost a point of pride, but for more serious gamers, it's kind of an embarrassment. At a certain point, I had to admit to myself, I'm not gonna play all these games. I could probably stop buying games today and not be bored for a long time, maybe even the rest of my life. I think about that for maybe half a second, but I'm still always checking Steam releases and also Steam sales. I see something that it's hard to resist, the backlog grows. In the grand scheme of things, who really cares how many games you own and how many you've actually finished? But a lot of gamers can't help but obsess over the backlog. It's always there, and it's never gonna go away. And that's all for today. Leave us a comment, let us know what you think. If you like this video, click like. If you're not subscribed, now's a great time to do so. We upload brand new videos every day of the week. Best way to see them first is, of course, a subscription, so click subscribe. Don't forget to enable all notifications, and as always, we thank you very much for watching this video. I'm Falcon. You can follow me on Twitter at FalconTheHero, and we'll see you next time right here on GameRanx.